Thank you
¿Qué
so
tal?
much
¿Qué
for being
tal?
here. This is like we're on
Thank
fire.
you.
We're
Veo,
getting close to the
veo.
end, but we have you to take us home for us to like close this like just hype of energy. And I want to start with you've had an amazing your career. Like you've been unapologetically breaking barriers, owning your worth, and built a strong voice, not only for yourself, but for others. So I'm leaving it up to you to take us through to like, how did you do it? So that we can then take a page from your life and move forward.
So thank you, Ileana, and everyone for having me, and also for these amazing speakers. I love the stories. So candidly, and it's interesting. I've been on Wall Street my entire career. I've actually went to school at night, so I've been at Wall Street probably younger than most. And I was always the only, right? It didn't matter. I think that people get caught up in the how was it to be the only Latina or Latino in the room. It was about how about like I was the only woman. And I had to wrap my head around that relatively quickly. The one thing that I've learned operating in a non-Latino world, and all these folks here, I feel your energy, and we're having drinks, I'm with you. You can be bold, but you don't have to be escandalosa, right? So what do I mean about that? Many Latinos are not extroverts. And so in a place of work, you could be your true authentic self, but where it's going to be a different arena than when you are like on a panel like this or in this conference where everybody's Latino, we get the nuance, we get all of that. So I think that there is a place for being yourself because people get that, well, did you blend in? Of course I blend in. I work in corporate America. I can't come in, back in my clubbing disco days, I'm not going to come in dressed for a bank the way I would be dressed to go out to Webster Hall, right? There is a difference. But nonetheless, authentic me always showed up. And what did bold mean for me? My parents instilled in me such a work ethic that I knew, right, that I had to, I don't want to say outwork, but in a very smart way, I had to work harder. There weren't that many women. There weren't, Latinos didn't factor in. I had already had to resolve myself to, there isn't going to be another Latino. And I got rid of that distraction. And getting rid of the distraction is almost like accepting something, right? Whatever you have to accept, you know, you come in bold because you have to sort of prove yourself and work hard. And you're working with smart people. And I think that for me, it almost was a blessing not to be in an environment where everybody was Latino because I had to, in a way, be as smart or if not smarter. My Latinidad came in a way that I think that people minimize about being bilingual. I spoke Spanish, although I'm born in the United States, I spoke Spanish first. I started school, I had no English. Let's just get some water, please. Apologies, I got a cold today. But my Latinidad came in my ability to translate, my ability to read the room, my ability to live in a bicultural world. I gotta say, because I would be, things would be happening at home and I had to kind of say it in school and translate it, or things would be happening in school and I would have to go home and translate it to my family, that I was always translating, right? Excuse me. And I was always translating and it really helped me. I could read people's behaviors. I can see when people were lost. I can see when I had buy-in. So for me, I can't want to call myself the silent Latina. It wasn't that I wasn't Latina, right? I've always been Latina and I've always showed up as a Latina. But that cultural nuance to live in two cultures at the same time, candidly, was my superpower. And it has been something that I have used time in and time out throughout my career.
I think that's you talk about so many important things in terms of how do we find that fine balance between embracing who we are, not only from a Latina perspective, but also just all of our intersectionality, right? How all of our identities and what makes us who we are and those expectations. And I moved here 13 years ago, and I didn't realize that I was a Latina until 5 years ago and what that meant because of these perspectives and these expectations of what others have told you or what you've seen that they should be. And I think that happens to many of us because once we find it, once we're able to identify that, we can run with it. But there's this weird in between where you
Right.
don't really know that you're not showing up in your authentic self and you're trying so hard to be what other people expect to you, and that's holding us back. So how do we create that broader narrative? How do we shift those that thing that's happening from those traditional definitions of success that are hindering us from moving forward?
You know, it's a tough one, right? Because what's the Latino mindset? You come here, you put your head down and you do the work, and somehow, some divine intervention is going to happen and ta-da, right? And it worked, I would say, probably for the Latinos that came to this country or starting here in the 60s and maybe early 70s. But that shift that's definitely a shift, right? More and more of us are getting educated, and then there's more and more people just in the workforce, and as technology and the globalization is all happening. I know that this is hard for many of us, but you always have to believe in yourself more than anybody else believes in you. And again, you don't have to show up escandalosa, because I hate to give that advice. Like, my sister's very shy, but my sister, there's no one in the family more Latina than my sister. It just oozes out of her, but she's a shy person. She's not going to come in. And what I think that it's important is that don't be the center of attention in the room, but be the center of attention in the room. So what do I mean? I mean, again, back to the escandalosa. Some of us can do it, and we're in industries where it's great and it works. But if I showed up the way I would be conversing with my Latina sisters, which I just did a couple of hours ago, I think that everybody's face would just drop and stare at me. And I am not really reading the room because I'm being me, but I do have to adapt, right? I do have to adapt. So I always say, be you, because somebody asks you, what are you, Latina, and whatever, what do you do for Christmas, celebrar los Reyes, whatever it is that defines you. Be Don't be the show in the room, but be the show of the room. Don't be the person that tries to stand out, but stand out in the room. And we actually do it with this, right? With your intellectual capital. No one can take that away. You know how many of us heard about getting an education or getting a trade or your experience, and your parents would tell you, I know my parents did, no one will ever take away your intellectual capital. Own that. It's yours. And don't get caught up, because I've gotten this my entire life. Lucky is the word. I think Ileana, you and I have had this conversation. If I walked across the street and found $5, I'm lucky. But if I worked for those $5, am I lucky or am I fortunate? I put in the work and I earned the $5. And so I've been told everything is, you're lucky because you walk in the room and you look like you, or you're lucky because you're on Wall Street, or you're lucky because you're married fulano de tal, or you're lucky because you live where you live, or you lucky. I'm always, my kid got into a great school and you're lucky. It must have been under affirmative action. Well, no. I'm lucky again was the dollar, and here it is. I found it. I found it today. Okay, and it's in my pocket. That's lucky. That's lucky. But when you've earned your seat, when you're doing the work, that's not luck. And I am grateful for the abundance of my life. But when people say to me, like, it's so offensive to me, candidly, it's like, no, 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 no. I earned that seat. And because I've earned it, and I know what my parents went through so that I could be where I am today, there is no way that someone's going to say to me, you're lucky or you don't belong in this room. If I walk in that room's mine. Full stop. No distractions.
Yeah,
Full stop.
absolutely. And I think you bring something very important. We have the same like everybody else. It doesn't matter what background, what color, what identity, what race. Like we own the exact same things and we deserve
Right,
the exact same things as everybody else. But
right,
I think that mindset starts, to your point, with us, with believing that we are just
right,
the same, just as smart, just as valuable, just as badass, right? Like
right,
Kirk and Tamika were saying, and it starts with us. So that is amazing, and I think that goes down to owning our worth
right.
and believing in that. So, what are your final words of advice to everybody that's still here with us today, so that we then kick off this day with choosing to own our worth?
So look, I actually wrote a couple of bullet points to keep it on message. So give me a minute to scroll up between my multiple screens technology. But here's a couple of things that, own it, don't be lucky, be fortunate, and elevate other Latinos. And this is a big pet peeve of mine as of late, that people forget other Latinos, that people don't recommend other Latinos, that you can't be happy for another Latina, right? Uh, that's a big mistake. That's a very, very big mistake. It is really, really important to be intentional. It is really, really important that we elevate others as we rise. And I'll tell you why. I think that our community is expecting for someone to come. There's somebody that you're waiting for, something, some miracle, some magic. Latino GDP is $3.6 trillion. So that's going to speak for itself. Or, they're going to see that we're going to be the majority workforce. That's going to speak for itself. It's not. It's up to us. And it pains me in my heart when I see that someone doesn't elevate another Latino. I was asked the other day for someone was looking for talent. I knew 5 people that I can recommend out of the gate that could go in and step into that role. You know why I know that? Because I get to know people. And you know what that does? You never know where those 5 people I recommended end up. You never know. Even if you're competing with them, know who you compete with. And I'll tell you why. There's a phone call. It's made to you. I get them all the time. People ask the most interesting questions of me. And you recommend that other Latina that you compete with. They do the same thing at another bank, or you name the vertical. Here's what happens. You did them a solid. You take them out of the workforce. They take the job. 2 things can happen. One day you may work for them. Another time, it could be that now you open and give yourself space, right? For yet a better opportunity. A, because you took that person out, and B, because the universe will reward you for being good. So Latinos, if you're waiting for someone to come, you're going to be waiting for a long time. We have to lock arms and do this for one another. And when people ask, how come this community? How come that community? They all give each other business. You know what? We need to do the same. If we want to, we have to be the change that we want to see. It starts with us because no one is coming. No one is coming. No matter how much the numbers are stacked on our side, no one is coming for us. So you
Yeah.
have to do it yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And this is the starting point. Thank you so much, Millie. Thank you so much, everybody. It was 3 hours and it feels like it was a blink of an eye. It went so fast, but just so many gems of truth, of passion, of purpose, of action, of wisdom. Own your worth.